let's get one thing out of the way. The
Yeah.
whole notion, well, English country dance, you look at the figures of, early Playford, bless his heart, has wonderful variety. It's not this long ways for as many as will. It's what, a third of the dances of first edition are
Yeah.
long ways. And you have
Well, and those are different long ways.
Exactly.
Okay,
Right. And,
okay.
and then you have the squares and the rounds and the two couple. And people look at that and say, well, look, it's squares. And
Yeah.
clearly that's where American square dance comes from. So talk a little bit about that
Okay.
English country dance
First
being
of
a
all-
direct link.
Yeah. First of all, no history is linear. Nothing comes directly from anything. And although you might find hints of something here and hints of something there, you come hints of something there, and you may say, oh, that's the Ur, that's the Ur. It just doesn't work that way. Dance is a creature of the people who dance it. It's a social activity danced by friends, people who are together because they like each other, they like each other's company. So obviously, certain peoples are going to come together. You're going to have, say, in an army, you're going to have the officers and the leading people in town. In a court, you're going to have the king and his people. And in a village, you're going to have the squire might come down and bring his daughters to dance. And they all dance differently. The early Playford books were created for a very special group of people. They were created for people that liked to dance in an intimate environment. They did not dance in dance halls. Dance halls hadn't been thought of yet. You cannot equate the spaces in which dances are danced with what kind of dance they dance. Long ways dances were not created because long ballrooms became into effect. Long ballrooms happened because people suddenly needed more space because there were more people dancing. But back to Playford, there's little dances in there. The long ways dances that are there almost entirely are danced very differently. They are danced by the first couple, the first figure to the bottom and back, then the second figure to the bottom and back. This is not the classic progressive dance that we know of today. So you have to remember that those dances were danced by very small groups, very elite groups. They had to be practiced, most of them, before they could dance them. They all took dancing lessons. Dancing lessons in England had been offered since before Shakespeare. I was just reading about a fellow named Firth who was teaching dancing in England in 1516. I couldn't believe it. So the English needed to learn how to dance back then. And obviously you had to have money to learn how to dance, which meant the money separated the people who could dance. Okay. Now, English society changed between 1650 and 1750. By around 1700, or a little bit before, they call it the commercialization of leisure. Suddenly, there were a lot of people who could afford to buy these lessons in dancing. And once they'd bought them, they wanted to show off what they had learned. So they could show it off with their friends, but that wasn't good enough. Suddenly, they demanded spaces and places to dance. And that's where you begin to get public assemblies in the early 1700s, yes. And in America, it wasn't far behind England. In 1732, there was a public assembly in Boston and a public assembly in New York, and they were vying for who is better. But these were generally the people who could afford the dance because it was a commercial thing. Dancing became a commercial thing. And also, dancing, because it was something you could buy, separated you from the rest of the world. It became a commodity which you could show who you were in society through your dancing. And let's see, I've got to stop there. Okay, we'll get back to that. And what happened with the dances at that point was the dances changed to accommodate the people. Suddenly, there were too many people wanting easier, slightly easier dances because these people were not the elites. And there were too many people, there were more people who wanted to dance, and the dances had to change. That's when they changed. They dropped these old, hard-to-do dances, and they became a long ways dance that you could start at the top, and the top couple could choose the dance and then show how it was done with the next couple, and then dance it down. And generally, initially, the whole set watched while the first couple did it. Now, the first couple had to choose several things. They had to tell the musicians what the music was. Well, they didn't tell the musicians directly. They told the manager of the dance. And then they also had to select the steps to perform the figures. Not only did they know the figures, but they had to know what steps to do. And this comes out in Dancing Masters ads. That's how we know. The steps were critical. Now, about the same time, we're thinking about square dancing here. About this same time, the same thing was happening in France. Only they didn't like the long ways dances. So in France, what happened, they took the non-progressive square and it became the dance of the day. And that was when the contradance started. The contradance, there is no evidence that the contradance, although the figures are somewhat, some of the figures look like Playford figures. We have grand squares in contradance, which is great. We have grand squares in Hudson House. Think about it. You can only do so many things with 8 people, or with 4 people, or with 2 people. You can arm, you can take hands, you can do this and that and the other thing. There's only so much to do.